Hi, everybody. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University. And I just love seeing everybody's faces on the Zoom session. It's just so many good friends, new friends, people I haven't seen before, people from all over the world, different countries. Our special guest of honor is Ken. Where is Ken? Yeah, Ken is from Japan. He's gotten up very early this morning to be here with us, and he's always a friendly face in these Symposia series. So I'm just really grateful that you all are here. And Gil, I'm super grateful that you're making time for us today. I love your work and your mission and what you're doing. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our program. For those of you who may not know, the Doctorate in Organization Development and Change is a professional doctorate in the Schmidt-Horst College of Business at Bowling Green State University. It is a program designed to develop thought leadership in service of our professional joy, the thing that we care very much about making a difference around in the world. And thought leadership at its core is all about sharing our wisdom, sharing knowledge in the field, extending knowledge, and making it scalable so that we can make a difference while we sleep. What I call that passive difference making, like passive income. You know, when we make income while we sleep, it's like you have a business, franchise, or books. And while you're sleeping, people are buying stuff, doing stuff, and you're making some money while you sleep. Well, when you create thought leadership around your passion and you create knowledge and you disseminate and put it out there, while you're sleeping, somebody might be reading what you created or what you shared, and it's making a difference in their lives. And when you do that, you make a difference and you also give yourself incredible professional opportunities because establishing yourself as a thought leader differentiates you to do the things that you love. And it's a calling card for people to ask you to come help them with the things that they need matched up with the things that you love. Our program is cohort based. We have wonderful students, professionals, executives and residents, people coming in, engaging with the students, an international trip, all kinds of wonderful things that go on that make this a really rich experience at BGSU. So lots of our students are here. So hi, everybody that are students in our master's or graduate program and faculty that are here and stuff like that. And thank you all. Gil, we have lots to learn from you. You have a wonderful experience, history, and work that you do. I'm really looking forward to being in the session with you and learning some more, particularly about this Lewinian perspective on the things that you're going to share with us. So I'd like to turn it over with you, and please take her away.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be with you. This is a labor of love for me, talking about Lewin and practical application today. So this is not just a history lesson. There'll be some of that, but this is what I do when I'm not lecturing. I'm doing Lewinian OD, and I just want more people to know how to do it. It's not that hard, really. It's rather simple because you don't have to be the expert. You just have to help with the process. So I'm going to bring up my screen here. I've got some slides, and okay, this thing always gets in the way at first. There. I trust everyone can see that. Thank you for the thumbs up. And so my plan today, we only have 55 minutes or so, and this is a lifetime worth of stuff that could be explored. So I intend to lecture for the first 20 to 25 minutes, give you some information. I'd like to have you have a chance to talk to a peer in a breakout for a few minutes to process like what you got so far, anything you're confused by, anything you think I'm crazy about, anything you want to know more about, etc. And then just have a group discussion for maybe the last 20 minutes. So that's my intention. And so here is the framework. Now I keep thinking about how can I get Lewin to be understandable to people today, and experienced practitioners, new practitioners, business leaders, social activists. And so this is my latest attempt. I just took what I thought were some of the key elements and put them into a visual. And I'm just going to go over these 6 elements. So one is training, action, research. Well, you can see it. I'm not going to read them all to you. There they are. These are 6 elements. One of the most exciting to me is bringing Lewin's work on social justice, on race relations, on prejudice into the light of the present, because he had some very practical ways to help people decrease prejudice. And he did his own action research around it, and it worked. So there's ways to approach it that are very respectful and bring in people from all aspects of life into a dialogue that's structured and then can lead to change. So that's one of the most exciting aspects, I think, of Lewinian OD. So the basics of Lewin, you've probably heard of action research. He actually called it often, not always, often training action research, because whenever he intervened in a system, part of it was helping people think differently. So like his famous race relations workshop, at least I hope it's famous, in 1946 in Connecticut, was a lot of interpersonal skills training for people who were trying to deal with racial tension in communities around Connecticut. So practice, people would role play, people would practice behavioral skills. So always there was some training. Whenever I intervene with a group, I start by teaching them about Lewinian OD. A couple of things I'm going to point out to you in a minute here. But I inform groups of hourly workers in manufacturing plants about the basics of what I have been taught and what I'm going to do with them so that it's transparent. I want it to be transparent. So, but basically, anytime you are thinking about a way to change things, trying it, and then assessing the results, you're doing Lewinian OD. And he's not the only source of plan check, plan do check, that kind of thing, but he was a big source of it. Lean manufacturing was influenced by Lewin. It's any kind of structured. You take the physical sciences approach to studying nature, you apply it to people. That was Lewin. That was one of his innovations. It wasn't being done when he was around in the 20s and 30s in Berlin at the University of Berlin. At that point, the theories of like human behavior were Freudian, for instance. You were just supposed to accept it. You weren't supposed to test it. Freud would get pretty upset with you if you tried. So you were just supposed to take his word for it. This is how it works. So Lewin took the process of science, physical science methods, and applied them to humans. Here is an example of that. So this is group dynamics now we've moved on to. It's all related, though. That's the thing about Lewinian social science. Everything's related. Everything's important to each other aspect of it. But he went into, with the US government, he fled the Nazis. And that's part of the reason he was interested in power relations, race relations, minority relations is what he called it. But he fled the Nazis, got to the US, and began doing, again, action research. And he did a lot of it for the US government, the State Department, the Department of Agriculture. Here, the US government wanted people to use food differently in their households. And they had a really good reason. Like, we want to get the best meat and so on off to the soldiers. It wasn't a plant-based protein consciousness at the time, but we want to get the best food off to the soldiers in World War II. So we need you to use stuff that you wouldn't normally use in your households. Well, what they did first was set up traditional expert style classroom, lecture at the people. They determined that it was women who controlled the household diet. So these were groups of women, lectured at them, and told them, what to do, basically. And then when they tracked that, they realized that the women weren't doing it. So then they asked Lewin, can you help us? So he did what he did over and over again. He did this with farmers in the Midwest. The government wanted them to irrigate differently during the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl years, they were called. And so they would send people out from Washington, D.C. in suits on trains, men, to go teach the farmers how to farm. And the farmers weren't changing their behavior any. So Lewin went all the way out there and said, okay, look, expert, talk to the farmers the way you normally do with this group. And we'll track how many of them actually implement something new. Now, this group of farmers, I want you to just give them the nutshell. Don't try to sell it. Just give them the basics. Let them know what you think is flawed about the government approach. Now, farmers, what do you think? Talk in pairs. Talk amongst each other. What makes sense to you? What do you know that the government experts don't know? Come up with your own ideas. What can you do? When the groups, the mothers here, the farmers there, college students being asked to change their diet, when all these types of groups were allowed to think amongst peers and talk with peers about what to do, they came up with ideas, and what's more important, they implemented them, like 80% of them. They sustained it. They did it and sustained it. That's the same thing I do with groups in work in manufacturing places. I just tell them, look, here's the deal. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You know more about your work than I do. The leaders here want to give you the chance to actually use your knowledge to make things better. And so then I lead them in a process, which I'm about to describe. And they come up with all kinds of things that they've known all along, but they've just felt like no one's listening. And also they've had OD consultants, other consultants, bosses telling them what to do over and over again. Say, okay, now we're going to do the Toyota production system. And they force it on them, even though the Toyota production system was built on workers raising issues. But people take these things and shove it down people's throats, and when they do that, people resist. If you have someone tell you what to do right now today about your behavior, you'll probably resist. If you come up with your own solution, you will probably implement it. I mean, it's almost that simple, Lewinian social science. That's what he demonstrated over and over again, inside and outside of organizations. So, now this was a big debate back then. It's still a bit of a debate now, but nature versus nurture. Behavior is a function of personality and the environment. My son has a physics doctorate, and he helped get myself and other OD people clear. It's not times the environment, it's and the environment in this formula. And so just go back to those groups. When the peers were allowed to think for themselves, they influenced each other. And even the ones who didn't come up with an idea were supportive and more committed to the ideas that others came up with. So the environment created more likelihood of commitment. If the environment is one where people never get listened to, then guess what you're going to get? Demoralization. You're going to get lack of commitment. So it's not that people were born demoralized and then they went to work. It's that workplaces are often structured in such a way that it's demoralizing. So the environment has a huge influence. I think if Lewin and I could talk, I'd do my best. I know I would do my best to help him get it. That actually, I think your own research shows that the environment's even more powerful than the individual personality. So anyway, but that's his formula. So homeostasis. So here he is borrowing from the physical sciences. He took anything from anthropology, from topography. He used map drawing techniques to describe social science dynamics. He took anything he could find that seemed to apply and applied it. And so certainly the theory of homeostasis in biological systems He took and applied it to social systems. And so again, no, I mean, an example of this with workers, I have them brainstorm with strict rules about brainstorming, like no debate. You're just going to throw out ideas. It doesn't matter if they're repetitive, doesn't matter. So you want to get people to loosening up their brains, using their left brain, not the editing brain. But people come up with what do they think is in the way of getting the work done. And coming out of Tavistock, that could be social or the word for technical, socio-technical. Okay, so it could be social or technical. It could be equipment. It could be mistrust. Anything, basically. And so then they just get that all out. And I like to have mixed groups of management and labor, because the more people are brought together, the more likely they are to stay connected. And that's another Lewinian finding, especially from his work on race relations. Separating people just keeps them separate. So bring them together with structure. Don't just bring people that are angry at each other together and expect them to figure out what to do. They'll probably just say stuff to each other that makes them angrier. So that doesn't help. So you have to have structure. But bring them together and then have them figure out together and hear each other. What do they think's in the way? Okay, great. Now you've identified the restraining forces. So Lewin said, look, let's say you want increased productivity, which almost every organization does. If you push the workers to work harder as your solution to increasing productivity, you're going to increase tension in the system, and eventually it's going to backfire. Whatever you gain is going to get eroded. And besides wherever you were, now you're going to have bitterness added in. So you're going to have decreased relations. So instead, you got to get the restraining force of management doing all the thinking. That's one I like to go after. You engage the workforce and all the people in between, all the different layers and functions, in figuring out what's in the way. And you've already reduced a restraining force. And so, but that's the deal. If all you do is push, you get pushback. If you can help identify what's holding us back and address those things, then you have a much stronger chance of solutions sticking. So that's the force field analysis that goes with homeostasis. All right, I think we're doing well here. Okay, so Lewin believed that authority is part of human systems. Unlike the what I would call fads of the 80s, 90s, okay, so there's self-managing systems in nature. And so then the idea was, well, let's have self-managing systems in human organizations. I mean, that might be fine if you have a very small system. But yes, it's true that all the cells in my hand know what to do without being told, but they aren't human beings. Human beings need some clarity about, well, what are we working on? Who does what? Who decides what? So Lewin always worked with the hierarchy and felt that authority relationships in democracy were important. You have to have, once you've elected a leader in a democracy, you need them to actually lead. You have to have a structure that allows them to lead. And you also have to have limits. In a democracy, you have to, he put it this way, we cannot tolerate the intolerant. If people are trying to get ahead in a democracy by dividing people and by attacking people, that has to be stopped. You just have to stop that stuff. You do not need to let people have free speech if their goal is to eliminate free speech. If they're using democratic freedoms to try to get rid of democratic freedoms, then we have to stop them if we value democracy. Now, I think that's relevant today. But anyway, that's an aside. So authority is part of any system, and part of the work I do, especially around leadership development, is help people get it. We all have authority issues. We were all born little. We all had big people caring for us, bigger siblings, adults. It wasn't necessarily a pleasant experience for a lot of people. And so a lot of people would just as soon not have a boss, or just as soon not be the boss, even if they are. They may not even like the word boss. And so then people try to come up with a new word. Well, we'll call them facilitators and stuff like that. I'm not very tolerant of all that. So what I want is for people to figure out what's the role, how do I do it in as adult way as possible? How do I treat people that are reporting to me as adults? How do I hold standards at times? Hold people accountable, monitor? How do I fulfill my role of authority in the system without overdoing it? But frankly, I think a lot of people underdo it because they're so ambivalent about it. He says it's befogged in most minds, authority. So here's what he came up with in one of his other famous studies. Perhaps you've heard of this. He had groups, there were groups of kids that were in after-school programs for 3 years, but he replicated these results with adults in industry. If they had different leadership styles running the groups, if the leader was too controlling, then the kids were the group was dependent on the leader. They didn't know what to do next unless, unless the leader told them. They weren't invited to raise issues. So there was high tension, low morale, but productivity. There was a fair amount of productivity. That's what he called the authoritarian style. There's too much leadership, is how he would put it. It's just leadership. On the right, in this triangle, is the democratic style. That's where you're balancing leadership and freedom. And so people know what to do, but they also are able to think for themselves, and they know what's coming, so they can do things without being immediately supervised. And so they have influence, a high amount of influence. And so there you have the ideal mix of high productivity and high morale, if you do this right. And this is true in a culture too. That more people will be responsive if you have a system that they can influence. Even though there's a strong tendency, I think, in US culture since the beginning of the Virginia colony towards the authoritarian style. The Virginia colony was the authoritarian style. So it's not like it's new. This has been a battle, really, the whole time, I believe. But then down here at the bottom there is the laissez-faire style. That's too much freedom. And I deal with a lot of people in authority roles who this is what's happening. It could just be that they're so busy in meetings all the time that they're just not available. And that creates ambiguity. But often it's that they don't really want to be a boss. They want to just be one of the group, which of course, as a human being, they are. They're just one of the group. But their role in the organization is different. They have to step up and let people know what they expect. So if they aren't doing their role, it doesn't work. People are confused. They wonder what the priorities are. It could be that people are just working in different directions. That's not good. So there's misalignment possibly. So there's also low performance because there's not clarity about what's really important. And so that's what Lewin found, low performance, but still high tension. Even though the leader often doing this is trying to be nice, the niceness is not translating into morale. They might like the leader, but they're still frustrated about the lack of productivity and the lack of clarity. So there's high tension, low morale. Now, what Lewin did, and I've replicated this every time I run a T-group workshop, which is another Lewin invention, what he did was he would leave the room. The leaders would leave the room. If in the authoritarian group, when the leader would just get up and leave without saying anything, the kids would stop working and start bickering with each other. So as soon as the leader left, productivity plummeted. It was entirely dependent on oversight. And the tension would be acted out between the peers. In the laissez-faire group, the leader would leave, without saying anything. The kids would start bickering with each other, just like in the authoritarian group. So the tension, they would start acting out. What's that? I heard a noise. Okay. Anyway, the kids would start acting out their tension with each other. Productivity was already low, so having it dip wasn't that big of a deal there. But in the Democratic group, if people are really engaged, they know what they're doing, they're enjoying it, they have influence, but they also have clarity, you can leave the room and they just keep working. Productivity is not dependent on the leader. That's the beauty of the democratic style. And that's group dynamics. The leader's influence on the group. So that's what I'm always working towards with leadership. And it's situational. You'll have some people, some groups that need more structure, some groups that need less, some individuals that need more. I've had this little cough. I read in the New York Times that people have had these lingering coughs, so I apologize for that. Anyway, the social construction of reality. Now, this is one of my favorite aspects of all this. So wherever you were born, you learned in that environment all kinds of stuff. And if you were born in 500 AD BC in Greece, you would speak Greek, the version of Greek in your region. You would, if you were male or if you were female, you would expect this of males. When there was a loss, the male would go up to a mountaintop and weep and wail and cry like crazy until they had gotten through their emotional release. And then they would come back down. And so male tears were considered very manly. The idea that boys don't cry, that women's cry more than males, is a social construction of reality. And it's so strong, it's almost taken over the world at this point. I mean, I've been in a lot of cultures doing this work, and almost everywhere, this is a belief about men and women. Whatever beliefs you hold about men and women are mostly social constructions. And so we grow up with our religion, with our aversion to religion, with whatever it is we are being trained early on in ways we don't even understand. And so we come into adulthood with all these beliefs in our heads, and some of those include prejudice. Any kind of racial belief that one group is better than another, or that one group is inferior to another. It's all a false hypothesis, according to Lewin, and it's all socially constructed. It's established in sociology that race is a social construction. I mean, we are all at the DNA level the same. With very minute amounts of difference, and not minute amounts that you can track over different skin colors. So all the racial stuff was like, it was intentional in the early Virginia colony to separate the poor white people from the poor black people by putting the poor white people in charge of the poor black people. They just made it up as a way to divide the lower classes who were rising up repeatedly and almost killing all the rich people. Bacon's Rebellion was the big famous final uprising. So we just made this crap up. And it became a system that has stuck in this country in a unique and horrible way. And we're still dealing with it. We have not recovered. But it's a social construction. We can think of it any way we want. We don't have to think of it that way, that there are races. It's crazy. We threw into the census a long time ago, like everybody in India is Asian. And that just hurts my brain even when I say it. But it's just we just stuck all these people in the categories. For a long time, the Irish were considered black by a lot of white, whatever that is, Americans. And certainly a bunch of other groups that were eventually included in whiteness were originally looked down on as dirt. Italians, anyone from Eastern Europe, etc. So we've got these constructions, and the hard thing is to not stay stuck in them. You can hold on to them if you want, but they aren't based in science. They're social. And so that means that beliefs and behaviors can be changed. They're social. And so you can, if you learn, like through a T group, which is a process Lewin came up with, where people talk about what's happening between them and within them, you can look at your behaviors and you can make adjustments. And so that's the root of his social justice work. And so I think what I want to do now, though, is throw you into these breakouts really quick, and you've got a lot to chew on there. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. So how about it, Tio? How about like 7 minutes of time for people just to talk to each other for a minute, take a deep breath, figure out what the heck they think I just said, anything they want to talk about.
Sounds like a plan. Me 1 second here.
Leave me out of it, please.
Yep.
Thanks.
I can do that.
All right. Last time the recording started, my cursor was right on the leave the room button, and I touched it.
Please don't.
And that was gone. Okay, so look, you have to unmute. I'm hoping that people will, any of you will just say whatever's on your mind, and we can go from there. And you can talk to each other too. You don't have to just talk to me. But what's up? Dave Fearon.
Had a nice time with David Bright, talking about what you shared, Gil. And the last thing that David said was, it's encouraging to see something that we thought of as being old, like the original Lewin models and thinking, feeling so fresh. And perhaps you were the freshener, Gil, in the way you've organized this for us. But I think that's incredibly important, because each field, and certainly organization development and the various development fields like leadership, need to have some deep roots. And if we're severed from those roots, where else are we going to find that kind of profound impact that Lewin had? So thank you for doing this. And it does feel fresh.
Well, I love hearing that. And I was just saying to Steve, we were together while you were together, that I was just reading Jung, his memoirs, which I read 50 years ago and then forgot about. And one thing he's saying is there's an obsession with new. And new, of course, is not necessarily better. And we do need to realize our roots, or we're rootless.
That's right.
So let's see, do we only have a few minutes? Thank you, Dave. And have we met before, Dave?
Yeah, I think it was during the Jamboree for the NTL. I was in a group with you.
Oh, okay.
And was your dad there at that time?
Quite likely.
Yeah. And how's he doing?
He's great. I'm going to interview him this afternoon. I'm using a family of origin interview method that we have students do in our leadership development program to make connections between your early experiences and your current habits.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that interview with my father. I started yesterday and we're continuing today. He's 95.
He was one of the pioneers back then in the NTLA kinds of origins. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm capitalizing, but I want everyone to know that Gil also has a wonderful father.
Cool. Now I think Ryan or Rijan raised his
It
hand
is
next.
it is Ryan. Catherine Wilson and I had a wonderful conversation about something that triggered me was when you talked about the intolerant, tolerating the intolerant, and that really I think so deeply. I'm all about the theory why, right? So that people are innately good, and that if there is someone who is expressing this view again, that there is almost always, and there's certainly evil people in the world who have trauma and behave on it, but that it's so important to actually understand that someone's expressed resistance or dissent or defiance could actually really be because they don't understand or agree with why things are happening. And if that is shut down by intolerance of the intolerant, then the change is the likelihood of a successful intervention really goes down. So
Well, at risk of, what I meant was, what Lewin meant was that when the Nazis were coming to power, they used things like freedom of speech as a shield for them to tear people down and attack people. And they were tolerated by the Germany post-World War I thought democracy meant sort of like anything goes. And so what Lewin was suggesting was that really we have to be intolerant. I think this is maybe different than what you just said. Intolerant of intolerance. So we have to say, no, this is not okay. Saying that all news sources are liars, no matter what they say, is not okay, which was also a method Hitler used. So we have to have some, and we really don't. We've got a pretty loose system around what's okay and what's not okay. So I may be saying that it's okay not to tolerate some things. I'm sure I'm saying that.
well, there's a lot more there, but I'll leave the space to Lisa and Bianca.
Okay, cool. Thank you. But does that make sense, Ryan? I mean,
It makes sense, but I've got a lot of, I still have some triggers left in there. So
yeah, no worries. It doesn't mean you couldn't screw up trying to, set standards, but no standards is also a dilemma. Okay, cool. Well, how about Lisa? I saw your hand next.
Hi, yes, thanks. I enjoyed the breakout group concepts where we talked about Gestalt theory and complex adaptive systems and ecological systems theory. So the individual at the center and all the influencing spheres around them. With a sociology background, I appreciated that and the connection to K through 12, with some experience in education. But we talked about emergent leadership. So the idea that you're based on your skills and experience, emerging as leader without a formal title in that sense. So removing the hierarchical approach for a more humanistic one, and then becoming the go-to person based on being a subject matter expert, right? Or seniority, not necessarily, again, an official title. And then I was interested in the conversation connecting to work from home and hybrid about the oversight, and overall how that might be a trend or moving forward with the future of work. And then I do agree with the kind of the inclusion approach in terms of having the Managing Without Leadership was one book that we talked about in terms of there's leaders of processes and leaders of people. So how do we bring together skills to explicitly train leaders on best ways to approach inclusiveness in terms of organizations?
Whew. That was a lot. So let me just try to grab a little bit of that. So for one, I think, of course, in every system, there's informal leaders. And that's great. And I still want to have structured leaders. And then I want them to behave in a humanistic way. So, but I don't think the way to solve leaders who aren't balancing freedom and influence, for instance, or freedom and leadership, like Lewin suggests, the way to solve that is to get rid of all leadership positions. I think it's to help people have a clear frame for how to lead, and also how to follow. So how to influence people that are in positions of authority, like your teachers. So how do you let them know when you think you're getting enough information or not enough, etc. When you're yeah, how to play together as musicians, like Ryan just said.
Yeah, I agree on the aspects
Hey,
of
Gil.
Yes.
Gil, we have two people and we're going to start wrapping up. And I think Bianca's been very patient and
Okay.
Francis is also asking and being patient.
Okay,
So
that's
Bianca,
cool.
if
I'm sure.
Bianca, if we could wrap up with Bianca and Francis, that would be great.
That sounds great. I'm sure I didn't cover everything you said, Lisa, so I apologize for that. You're quick.
All right,
Bianca.
I'll keep this very brief. Mainly, we were talking about with Lisa and I, group decision making and social fields. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in implementing Lewinian theory now in the digital era. So now people are influenced at such a global scale, virtually, that managers cannot possibly have control over, what people are engaging with or seeing outside of like an office.
Yeah, I think the same things apply. So, and I've done a bunch of online like group work, but I think that if let's say you're the boss or whatever you want to call that person, and you have people who are working remotely, you still have to get clear with each one about like, are they getting what they need from you? And also, are you getting enough information from them? And if they're working towards a clear goal with you, then you don't have to monitor whether, how much time they're spending each day working. You shouldn't be wasting your time doing that at work either. So, I just think that if you're really tuning into people and working on enough freedom and enough structure, that you can do that remotely or in the office, and this whole thing of like forcing everyone in is foolishness, or assuming everyone wants to be out. But so what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know, again, this is more of extensive topics, but I appreciate your like condensing it into a single kind of like thought. So thank you.
Cool. So cool. I think the same thing works for inclusion. Anybody that's in charge should be making sure they're spending time with individuals, understanding like how is this for you, especially if you're sort of like different somehow than everyone else, a woman and a group of men or whatever it is. Is there anything I can do to help you feel, like at home here? And so I just think you got to be paying attention to the same stuff. Okay, so Mike.
No, wait. It's
Okay.
Francis.
Francis.
Yeah, Francis, and then
I
we're done.
I think ending on time is more important than my comments, so I'm going to take back my spot and give it to someone else.
Okay, well, I'll say that I'm not in any hurry, but I mean, Tio, what is your...
The one thing I wanted to point out is that I think when we were talking about Lewin, and even now, we use the term leadership and leader interchangeably, and they are not. The thing that makes leadership work today is that it can come from any place in the organization. It's not necessarily associated with the leader. So I just want to point that out, that sometimes I think we're using them interchangeably when they're not.
Well, that gets back to the informal and the formal, but I want the formal structure to be functioning as well as possible.
Yeah, my comment had nothing to do with that. I support I support that stance.
All right. Yeah,
Okay.
So Gil, we are going to want to end in just a couple minutes. So if you want to go ahead and maybe grab Mike, since you might have a connection, maybe wrap up.
It was just very quickly. It was on the social construction part, which I'm always fascinated by. And more recently, you hear of the idea that organizations are socially constructed through discourse, dialogue, all that kind of stuff. Without dialogue, discourse, they wouldn't even exist. And that's you get to sort of a postmodern view of organization. I don't know, would Lewin have recognized that, or is that a more modern development?
Well, that's a whole different hypothesis, that there is such a thing as postmodern, and that there's maybe something called progress, even, is another hypothesis that's worth debating. So what was your first point?
Well, I suppose would Lewin have recognized those kind of descriptions? Are they kind of like the dialogic OD guys, Bush and Marshak and so on? Start from there. I just wondered if that's something that you can trace back to Lewin, whether Lewin would have recognized it in that form, or whether that's a more modern, more recent development.
Well, I'll say Lewin for sure was completely about dialogue.
Yeah.
So dialogic OD to me is actually a growth out of Lewinian OD.
Yes.
Yeah.
With less clarity about authority. So I'm I know them both. I like them both, and I actually think they've lost a little bit in their transition. It's more about dialogue can happen anywhere, and change can emerge from anywhere. And I think if you want change to sustain and stick, you need to work with the structure that exists. So we differ a little bit.
Well, Gil, we got a way to handle the ending here that'll work for you and everybody. And so thank you so much for your time. We'll end, but we'll also stay on for those that really want to stay on, because it sounds like you have a little bit of time as well, Gil, to stay on and chat with people afterwards. So we'll officially say goodbye right now. And Gil, thank you so much for all that you've shared. We want to continue. I would love to continue having you do more of these and be engaged with our community and so forth. So thank you so much. And for everybody out there, thank you for coming. It was a real treat, and I loved how you were engaged with Gil and his concepts. And if you wish to stay on, feel free to stay on for a post-session conversation.
Okay,
Otherwise, bye. Thank you.
I just put in the chat a document. It's the first 2 chapters of my most recent book, which applies Lewinian social science to racism.
That's awesome. Thank you, Gil. It's a
My
nice little
pleasure.
treat. Yeah, real treat. Gil, again, thank you. High five. Appreciate you doing all that you're doing. And everybody have a wonderful day, and stay on if you would like to as well. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. So I'm happy to keep chatting with.
Yeah, what
whoever
I'm going to
wants
do is I'm going to make a co-host. I have another meeting myself.
Okay.
So I'm going to look at the participants here, and I'm going to ask, let's see, who's still staying?
If everyone leaves, it won't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I'm just
I
seeing
want to
this-
stay for a minute.
Yeah, so Gil, I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay.
You are, you are. So apparently if I leave, it ends. So I'm going to make you a host. How about that?
You
Okay.
can leave
So
your
if
camera
I-
on,
so,
Steve, so we
because I
can
want the
read your
recording to stay
whiteboard.
on. Sometimes the best part of the whole session that's recorded is the after conversation. So I always like to record those.
Oh my
So I'm going to make
goodness.
you the host, Gil.
Yes.
And there we go. And it's recording. I'll get it later. Again, thank you so much. I love staying for afterwards, but I did schedule myself for something else right now.
No
So,
worries.
Big hug to everybody. Gil, again, thank you.
Yeah,
And I'll talk to you all
Thanks,
soon.
Steve.
Bye for now.
Take care.
Yeah.
Gil, your model, going back to Lewin's, the model, starts with what he called training and action research.
Hmm.
Key word for me is action. And Carol here will probably be nodding right away because she's very much involved in action research. And Peter Vale, who was my mentor and with whom I finished the last book that Peter wrote, often quoted something that I think Rothsberger used to say at Harvard in those early days. He says, efficacy at the point of action. So that gave everyone in the organization study of that time a place to put your eyes on. And then around the action that you're empirically observing flows your imagination and your wit, as well as that of others. And I've had the concern that in the Academy of Management, which is something David Bright and I talked about in our breakout, they pull away more and more. The research that gets published is more and more removed from the action and the action takers. And it aggregates things called bunches of data and tries to explain how organizations work from that very removed position. How can we get back to action as something about which we all care and admire and are influenced by? That's my speech.
Well, yeah, I don't know about the, I mean, I'm in a bit of a difference with the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science editor right now about that very thing, because I think Lewin wanted the hourly workers in the organization in particular that he influenced. It was a manufacturing organization that was dealing with cloth, making garments. And the hourly workers, he engaged them in doing their own research on, coming up with their own hypothesis. If we did this, this would improve things, and measured it and so on. So he was teaching everybody to do research about changes that they wanted to influence.
Yeah.
And so there's such a spectrum. He wrote about different types of research, but the one that excited him the most was normal people, not academic researchers, doing research on to take social action or organizational action. And the dilemma is that he never, I think, figured out how to fix, except for himself. He published all kinds of action research stuff in academic journals, but there is that split between and where some think only research is only something that's carefully constructed by experts.
Yeah, and controlled.
Right, and that misses the whole point of action research. I think some of the most valuable application is by people. Well, action too, Dave. Like right now, it's taken me a year and a half, but my bank is finally going to let me. They're going to have lunch with me, where they try to describe how they monitor their lending practices, and how do they know that they aren't favoring white people over black people, which is, been prevalent in the banking industry in the U.S. since the beginning, and certainly even during the PPP loans. There was, discrimination in a dramatic way. And so I've been asking my bank, which I've been with for 30 years, well, how do you know? And first they spent a year telling me, well, we're a fair lender. Different people just blew me off, basically. And
it says so right on the,
yeah, it says it right on the thing. So finally,
Bank of America.
It's not Bank of America. That's tougher. I have less confidence in them. This one's called WISFIS. It's a local
with mortgage loan practices as well, and historically of redlining. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what actually I'm asking them about, is how do they know that they're being fair lenders around mortgage loans? And so to me, to take action is, I think, something that any person, any citizen, the way to do it is to do it. And, and then it'd be great if there was there's already a lot of great social action going on, but we still have a deeply flawed society, I think. So
the power of the individual. Yeah. Lisa, you are amazing.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I appreciate your comments as well. Yeah, and also your comments, Ryan, on the different types of structures within leadership and organizations, because I remember hearing about in our educational leadership program, the focus on differing values and types of knowledge. So if you're a new leader entering in an organization and you have a team that's been there before you, observing before making any changes and asking them about their organizational knowledge and kind of respecting and valuing and making it a reciprocal process. And I found that to be helpful personally too, as well. I agreed with your kind of the keeping of how do we find the growth areas in the existing structure and maintaining that balance between formal and informal leadership.
Yeah, I'm glad you're hearing that, because I think the OD profession for the last 60 years or so has thought that the way to handle hierarchy is to get rid of it. And I don't care if you have a flat organization, you still need to know, well, who decides what, who does what. You have a lot more work to do then, I think, in terms of role clarity. And so how do we decide, and so on. You certainly don't want to take a vote every day on whether or not to, start by washing the men's room instead of the women's room. I mean, there's decisions that people just need to make, and it's not bad. It's not bad for them to have that authority. And so if you think the CEO needs to decide everything, that's ridiculous. And sometimes we've asked people that. We're doing these big cross-functional planning sessions with Lewinian force field analysis and so on, and we'll say, okay, now who's really the right person to decide this? If you can't get a decision made on whether or not, like, let's say a feature. The marketing people want to add all the features that the customers could possibly want, and the engineers want to only add the features they can actually make. And so they fight with each other. And so who should decide that? And the first thing people say is the CEO should decide. And that's crazy, because the CEO doesn't know anything about it. Finally, in that case, they settled on agreeing that one of the engineers that was the most trusted by both sides would decide.
You're going right into my point about mastery-based authorization. And that's also, this is also the fallacy of functional division, right? Marketing is here, sales is here, engineering is here, product is here. And there's this status arc, competition between those to get the favor of the CEO to do this. And if there are functionally integrated small groups, right? We're talking 7 to 10 groups that are functionally integrated, serving needs and making agreements, like the whole the Morningstar agreements, right? That there are agreements between teams to exchange services. I mean, all that stuff. And yet there is a legal purpose for compliance hierarchy. But if you I think minimizing that and really trusting, this is McGregor again, trusting the mastery of those folks who are closest to the customer, doing the action and gathering the knowledge. I mean, that's like the Holy Grail, at least from my perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, totally in agreement on that, especially with so I'm in the education technology space or field, and we once had a guest speaker who was the CEO of Intel who went to our school, and he was saying that you need the engineers, you need the marketing to translate the message, but also the sociologists and anthropologists to help determine the needs of the population that you're building the product for in order for it to be a success. So for example, like user experience, customer experience, what is the journey of the customer? So I, for example, was in a client-facing role and then taking that feedback to the teams that will then integrate it. And so I think that's really important to kind of move beyond the silos and into kind of that specialization or skills-based emergent area, because what you pointed out about Lewin is, for example, once people feel they're part of that feedback process, they're more likely to be in line with it. So if the CEO says, here's information I'm providing transparently to help us all make a decision, and I'm taking into account your thoughts and ideas, that I think may help the organization move forward a bit more quickly than kind of a process where it seems like there's only one point of contact or decision making for cross-functional or cross-disciplinary knowledge.
That makes sense to me. The influence needs to be real, and not everybody can influence. So if you're putting in an IT system in a multinational corporation, not everybody's going to be able to influence it, but you should have a bunch of end users influencing that product early in the process. So the influence is not just that they get to hear about it, but that they actually get to influence it. And I think a lot of times it's just PR that people are engaged in some way, but it's more like they're just being told still, here's what's coming. You should like
You're-
it.
You're being informed that this is happening to you.
Yes.
I
But
mean, the-
Usually
yeah.
after the fact. Yeah.
I just want to say that there has been for a long time, certainly Dad wrote a paper back in the 60s about centralization and decentralization. And so the debate and what would happen in a lot of places is people would come in, and in order to put their sort of like their stamp on the organization, a new leader, they would, let's say, decentralize engineering. So they would put engineers in every group instead of having an engineering department. And so they were more responsive to the groups, but they were less organized around long-term engineering projects. And so then the next leader would come in and centralize the engineering department to fix it. And so I sort of think the same thing about like having cross-functional groups versus departments. If you have a department, you have to have structure of how they are interacting with the other departments in order to cooperate, accommodate. And if you have a cross-functional group, then you're still going to have structures for how they know, like if it's a centralized group, then it's easier for them to lead in a certain direction for that function. And so if it's decentralized, how do those functions influence from within the decentralized, whatever it is, you have to help humans work together.
That's right. That's the
I
bottom
mean,
line.
that's sort of where I am. So
Yeah.
Carol?
Carol has to say something. I can't wait.
I'd love to hear from Ken also, and Nahal, if I'm probably mispronouncing it. But go ahead, Carol, please. And then
Well, we
Please
could
go
go
ahead.
on forever, and I'll make a link because that's what I usually do. I was in a breakout room with Ken, and it
Okay.
was fascinating. I asked him what I thought was a very simple question. What is the appetite for Lewinian OD in Japan? And he opened my eyes to the history of how involved Lewin was in Japan and how it was completely accepted. So I'll let him speak and then I'll say what I want to say, because mine is a connection to the scholar practitioner conversation.
Cool.
So can I encourage you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Lewin came to Japan in 1930 or 1931, and he taught his ideas at the Tokyo University professors. Probably his name is Matsumoto. And Professor Matsumoto resisted to accept his idea, but finally he adapted his idea, and Professor Matsumoto was first student, Lewinian student in Japan. And also he moved to Nagoya City, which is a central city, one of the central cities in Japan. And he taught something to Japanese scholars and practitioners. And that's the reason why Nanzan University took a long-term collaborating program with the NTL. And then finally, he moved to Kyushu National University to meet with Professor Sakuma, who went to the German to learn the Lewinian theory.
Berlin?
Berlin.
Okay.
And then that's the reason why Lewin came to the Kyushu National University to meet Professor Sakuma, and almost all his belongings dropped in the university.
And then he took the train, the Siberian train, from east city of Russia, and then back to Berlin. And that the version of Japanese social psychology. And then after World War II, almost all Kyushu and so Nagoya and so Tokyo, so those bunch of social psychologists rushed into NTL to take a T group session, and then spread all around the Japanese
Wow.
recovery process, because mining sector and the steel making sector is a key component of recovery from the World War II. And so T group idea that apply are more applied into mining sector and the steel making. And then so Japanese Ministry of Industry picked the whole idea and into the Toyota and so Nissan, and that's the reason why we apply the quality control by our group. And then naturally, so almost all Japanese love to take group session.
Okay,
I never knew that. I'm so glad to hear that.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah, yeah. Because I was a fairly close study of Joseph Duran, Edward Stemming,
Right.
others who, but I can see now that they reap the harvest of,
And also
of awareness that Lewin created back in the 30s.
And also, just World War II, lot of military base run by mostly U.S. Open their library at military camps. So a lot of Japanese scholars were invited to take a book, take a paper, and read paper, read books, and then that's another reason why we adapt a lot of scientific knowledge just after World War II.
Wow.
So
that's fascinating.
Yes, that's the reason why Japanese always appreciate the U.S. openness.
I mean, two things are popping to mind. One is, do you have any documentation? Like, is there a paper on this? Because I would love to have it.
Yes.
I've thought of that. Yeah.
Can you attach it here or send it somehow to Carol, or I don't know. Is there a connection you have that you can?
Yes.
Steve.
One of the good example is Morrow.
Morrow, yeah, Morrow.
Famous Morrow wrote some piece of Lewin's journey to Japan on his book.
Okay.
And also, so I'm just looking for exact good paper describing the Lewin's journey to Japan.
If it exists, I'd love to have it. But now I knew he went to South Korea also. And there's apparently a institution or part of an institution named after him. And I just learned that like a year ago from Bob Marshak, actually. So.
Oh, really? Yes. He went to South Korea and stayed for a long time.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear.
Can I put an email in the chat? If you send it to me, I'll send it to all the people who are on the call, because I have contact with all of them. And then I'll give it to Teo to put in the spot for everybody.
That's a great idea. Here's mine also.
Oh, thank you.
I have yours, Gil. May I speak a few minutes? Or are we ready to end?
It's fine with me.
I'll stick around as long as you want to talk, Carol.
The immediate, when I went like this, was how central this is to all the polarity work. So your language, Gil, didn't include the word parity or polarity or paradox or dilemma, but all those processes, I don't know if they were based on Lewin. I think Barry Johnson really understood Lewin, but that's really what you're talking about. And how can you use that to tell people it's not either or, but it's both and? So that was my excitement at that moment. But the real reason why I would like to speak is that Lisa and Dave were part of an initiative. I was also part of it last year that was started in the academy in order to influence the future of doctoral education.
Yeah.
And we did a PDW, and it ended up, and I'm sorry David Bright isn't here because he's more involved with the overall OD&C direction. And this was a sub-initiative on the future of doctoral education. And what came out of it was you can't separate the two, and that the future of doctoral education is deeply connected to the future of OD. And when you talk from a practitioner's perspective, Gil, and action research, it is so personally important because we had a subgroup which was actually being pushed by Bill Torbert. You know Bill Torbert?
I don't.
He's
Yeah.
been around for 50 years.
3 levels of research or witnessing, if you will, what's going on in the world. And he's so devoted to getting that point across. He was at Boston College until he retired. That he took a lot of brickbats over the years, hasn't he, Carol?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
he spoke in what they call esoteric ways. But what he was trying to do, similarly to what I think probably Lewin was doing back then, was to try to get people to let go of their hard-held, hard-headed points of view about how the world works, mainly scholars, and consider something else. And so there's a lot of us who deeply respect Bill, but I also saw how many times people go, oh, God, yeah. What are they saying? They just say they don't want to think. And so he and a number of others are still at it, in close to my age now, in their 80s, saying, hey, you may have ignored me over the last 6 decades, but I've still got my chops and I still want you to understand. And I think your dad's doing that, and others who are in that age group. Ed Schein, to his last day, was teaching. To his last few hours was teaching. I happen to have the privilege of being on that session that he taught for the OD open source. I have to point out one other quick thing. Take us down to something very tangible. Your last slide, you showed Lewin outside of a building with several other people.
Mhm.
That building was my building. I wasn't there in 46, 47. It's where I taught for 30 years, my last 30 years, Central Connecticut State University. New Britain State Teachers College, probably was called a normal school back then. But that corner with that plaque, the blue, that was when I went to that school in 86, they put me in that building way up in the eaves in an office way up on the top, because they didn't have a better office for me. And I was so glad, because what I could do is sit there knowing what I did know, because I was Peter Vale's student, that the history of that building, and I could actually feel the ghosts. As an OB professor, I would go down and sit in the very hall, the founder's hall, where he had those conversations with the educators. And I can, like, come on, fill my head. I want to know how to not be contrary, but think in ways that may be contrary to the conventional wisdom. So you're doing a great job, Gil, for helping us with this. Keep it up.
Well, thanks.
So
And
I want to close, and then you really close, with asking you a very direct question, because I think the people on this call are really representative. We just submitted a symposia, what do you call it? A proposal for a symposia on action research using Bill's model and 3 European action research PhD students who are incredibly lonely
that's
because
sad.
yeah, it is sad. And they're way ahead of American students.
Yeah.
So I want to know, yes or no, and then we'll continue it. If you would consider having an initial conversation with me and then going forward, doing something like you just did, and maybe contributing an article to the Action Research Journal, which is the liaison between the practitioners and the academy and is not as well received. It has a very high journal rating, but it's not where a lot of, certainly not newly minted doctoral students publish. And as you know, the DODC, which I am deeply involved with, is trying to, which is why Steve started this initiative, is trying to make a place for working professionals to gain research skills. And if you can't apply Lewinian concepts within that, then I give up. And that's where I believe the connection with Lisa Myers is, because she's doing a special issue on Lewin. Do you know that, Gil?
You mean for the ODR?
Yeah.
Yes, I do know that. And
I assumed.
I think she's rejecting my article on this framework because she said it wasn't a new enough angle on Lewin, and it's not about application in today's world.
Oh, come on.
Are you
So-
making that up?
I'm not making that up. And so I was just thinking, well, if she rejects it, do you want it?
Well, I'm not
There
an
you go.
editor of a
Okay.
journal, but I sure wanted. I
You
wanted
you
to
just
go
mentioned,
I agree, but
Hil-
I've read our
Hillary could
session
do it.
today, just alone a few ideas of how to apply it as well. So I think there could be some great collaborators.
I think we can have a little group
Sure, but
activity here.
I may be confused. I thought you just mentioned a Journal of Action Research.
Yes, Hillary
Looking-
Bradbury.
Okay, well, I
Who-
mean, if Lisa rejects this article, I would be happy to submit it someplace else.
I think
Well-
Hillary might be interested.
How would I get a hold of her?
Carol can take
Get
you
in
there.
touch with me
Okay,
and
cool.
we'll make it happen.
Okay, I just want to say a couple things before I lose track of them. Were you done, Carol?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You said yes to my inquiry. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, I gladly would chat with you also about this symposium or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
sure. That'd be fun. I just, I'm part of also a graduate school. It's seeking reaccreditation after closing for a few years, but it's a T group based graduate school out in Seattle. And one of the board members lives in Japan. And I forget his name right now. He's on the board. My brother's the president and he's more involved with his board and stuff. I hardly know the board, but that's just one connection that I don't know if he knows this history of Lewin in Japan or not, but so that's just one thing that popped into my head. These are like random thoughts.
So I'll give a plug for the Institute. It's called LEOS. And they have been giving wonderful conversational events with the absolute founders of that program and known people in the field.
Including Edgar Schein before he passed away. He was one of our.
Yes, I was on that one.
Yeah.
So why don't you put in the chat the URL for it? And
Well, I can certainly say
Origin.
this. Here's the simple, if you want to learn more about Leo's, it stands for the Leadership Institute of Seattle. Dad started it in 1969. And and then after many decades, it faded. And so my brothers revived it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's exciting. We just finished with 2 certificate groups. Also, it's, cohort based. I didn't really think this was the place to like make a big plug for Leo, so I hadn't even thought of it until the Japanese connection.
Right.
I
was going to put it in the chat and I decided not to if you weren't bringing it up.
Yeah, it's cool. But then, so 2 other things. One is your 3 lonely German PhD students. I would love it if you would tell them about our upcoming German tea group workshop in the Bavarian Alps the last week of June.
You have to be kidding. I literally met them in the Alps where we flew to Innsbruck and then a train and did an action research retreat.
Nice.
They should probably get a little NTL.
Yeah, I
Yes.
how that could be an isolating process. There's actually an international online student writing group that meets every week on Zoom, twice a week. So I've been through that process. So if they're ever looking to connect with students internationally to join a writing group, there's that too. And speaking of Academy of Management, Carol, thank you. I put our timeline and the presentation in the chat from the previous PDW, and we'll be glad to contribute to any other feature one as well. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Both
Okay,
Lisa and Dave were part of that PDW planning.
Yeah.
So Carol, I should send you the information about the tea groups and also that we're going to connect about the symposium and also about whether or not Lisa decides that the article is relevant in today's world. And the last thing I just want to say, Dave, is that I went to your campus. I went to the spot where Lewin's picture was taken. I had my wife take several pictures of me trying to do the same pose. Lewin had his like toes sticking out. I don't know. It's a let's see, it was like 2 years ago. It was the 75th anniversary.
I thought that blue sign looked too modern. That's the building sign on the corner of the building. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And no one on that campus had any idea that Lewin had been there or anything. I was like, you are missing such an opportunity to.
Oh, they could have. Steve Cavallari, a co-author in 2 books with me, we both championed futilely to get some recognition of that event and of Lewin and Ord behavior, which is what we were there to teach. But no, the accountants ruled.
Yeah, I tried to talk to the social science department head and they were not interested, basically. So, but I love the idea of feeling his spirit and the spirit of all the people that were there. And so I go places for that reason. I've been to the Psychological Institute in Berlin, his home outside of Berlin. So, I believe that there's more to this experience of being human than meets the eye. So
we are the spirit of the spirit. And now you have to go to Japan, and Ken, you have to host him in Japan and show him around where Lewin did his teaching.
I would gladly come.
Well, good luck on your ventures, and thank you for staying with us. This has been a tremendously fruitful conversation from my learning standpoint. And I have some of my favorite people here on the screen, and now Lisa, you are too.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
Dave, Lisa's the one who worked with me on the history timeline.
Yes,
for the BTW last year. And Ken, I am so grateful. If you wouldn't have given me that, these other people would not have received it. So thank you.
Yeah, and I put the timeline in the chat. Our associate provost was excited when she heard about it and wanted to see it too. And so There's that. And then I sent you the link, Carol, on the group for the students, international group. It meets every
I
week.
saw that.
Yeah.
This is so exciting.
Now, I haven't been paying attention. The things that are in the chat that we're about to lose when we end this, like, is there a paper on Japan here?
No.
Yes.
Lisa?
There's a
Yes.
link.
Yeah,
There's a
I
link that-
I found something on Google Scholar.
Okay.
Just right there for Lewin and his Japanese work, and it just
Where did you
whether
put
that's
that?
specific.
Oh, it's above where I am. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a way
great.
to save the whole chat.
I just grabbed that. Thank you. What else is in here? Anything else?
There's
So
a way
if
to save
you-
the whole chat. Yeah. Oh,
If
sorry.
you, Gil, look at the
Yes.
3 dots on your screen
Mm-hmm.
at the
Save it.
bottom of the chat,
Mm-hmm.
it'll let you save the chat and you can go back and look at it and have all the links.
And
Okay.
you're the host, so you can easily do it. Yeah.
Ooh, I just did it. Okay, cool.
There you go. You get
Okay.
power. Power.
It's something.
It
Thank
is.
you
And
very much. I
One
really-
more.
Yes.
Oh,
Rion, you are always so quick and helpful, but Ken, do you have the ability to send the thing that you thought you would have? Will you send that later and I'll distribute it if it's not available right now? Because I don't want to lose Ken's perspective.
yeah.
No, not at all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me such an interesting and illustrative conversation with you, all of you. Oh, thank you for sharing the ideas and experiences. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Japan also, and so Chicago at the AOM conference this year.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
So I have to say one more thing and then Gil does the last word. Ken is the person who brought appreciative inquiry to Japan.
Oh, okay.
So he has a very human-centered perspective.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Thank you all for your inspiring work. Yeah.
It's a big
Okay.
responsibility if I
Way to
have the
go.
last word. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your enthusiastic participation. So really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.